Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got another newsroom review here to discuss. We've got some signings to talk about, some waiver updates, some injury updates, and we've got some trade rumors involving Buffalo, Boston, Vancouver, and a couple of other teams. We'll touch on all this coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we begin this video, do not forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this for all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget the subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. And we're trying to hit 650 by Friday's trade deadline, so if you can leave a subscribe, it really does help with the channel. And on top of that, don't forget to stay tuned for videos coming in the very near future. If you can, and you haven't already, check out my Buy Me a Coffee page. I'll link to it down in the description below. If you can, and it's within your means, make a donation. It really does help with the channel. And on top of that, don't forget to stay tuned for my March 6th live stream at 11:30 a.m. Mountain Time this Friday, as we're going to do a live stream talking about all the moves that happen on trade deadline day. So definitely over to stay tuned for that. But in today's video, we do have another news and review here to discuss. So we've got two signings here to talk about that happened yesterday. So the first one was a player who was unsigned, signing a one-year deal for the remainder of the season, and that was in the Seattle Kraken organization. Gustav Olofsson, who's a left shot defenseman, 31 years old, spent the past couple seasons playing in the Seattle Kraken organization, got the occasional stint at the NHL level, but was mostly an AHL level guy. They did not get signed in the offseason by the Kraken, so he had been unsigned. Well, he's officially signed a one-year league minimum deal to finish out the season with the Seattle Kraken. So not too surprising there, he's been a pretty good player over in the Coachella Valley this year, putting up 2 goals and 16 points in 29 games. Now because he signed this, he's eligible to be called up if the Kraken run into some injuries, so not too surprising there, but the Kraken gets some added depth insurance with a familiar face in Gustav Olofsson, so very interesting out there. And then like we talked about yesterday, players who are signing ELCs for next year can officially sign their ELCs. So Matthias Malofsky, who's a 21-year-old center/winger for the New Jersey Devils, he was picked in the 6th round of the 2024 draft, has finally gotten his ELC. He gets a 2-year ELC with AV of $973,000 that'll begin at the start of next year. So not a bad pickup here for the Devils. Malofsky looks like he could eventually be a pretty decent prospect for the Devils. He had 3 goals and 13 points in 35 AHL games already this year, so he's getting some time at the pro level in the AHL, so not too bad of a contract there for the Devils. And Malofsky, I think eventually could be like a decent bottom 6 forward, so very interesting out there. But the Devils signed Malofsky to a new deal, so very interesting note there. But those were the 2 signings from our past couple of days. Next, going over to a couple of injury updates. When it comes to some injury updates, only a handful of injury updates here to talk about. So first, Zach Werenski missed Monday's game with an illness and is out day-to-day. Doesn't sound like it's anything too serious, but it was a bad blow there for the Blue Jackets, as yesterday they were playing without Zach Werenski. We'll see if he's good to go for later tonight's game, but that is a bad blow there for the Jackets. John Gibson left Monday's game with an upper body injury and is out day-to-day. I don't know the extent of the injury. If it's anything long-term, it could definitely derail the Red Wings season, because Gibson has been phenomenal for them this year, so hopefully it's nothing too serious. But Gibson did leave Monday's game with an injury. Armia, who's been dealing with the upper body injury, has officially been placed in injury reserve, so it sounds like he's going to miss at least a couple of games, if not longer, so bad blow there for the Kings. But Armia was placed on injured reserve. Marcus Foligno, who suffered an undisclosed injury on Friday and missed Sunday's game due to it, was placed on injured reserve, so it does sound like Foligno's going to miss at least a couple of games after the injured reserve placement, so bad blow there for the Wild, as they are without Saul Baum, 6 forward Foligno for the next couple of games. Adam Wilsby left Saturday's game with undisclosed injury and is out week to week, so that's a bad blow there for the Preds blue line, as they were without one of their top-end defensive players and Wilsby. Chaz Konechny missed Monday's game with upper body injury and is out day-to-day, so hopefully it's nothing too serious. Konechny is a big piece of the Philadelphia Flyers team. And Mark Stone, who we talked about in our last video, left Sunday's game with upper body injury, has officially been ruled out as day-to-day. So we shall wait and see if he's able to go later tonight, or if he's going to have to wait a couple more games. So very interesting note there, but those are some very interesting injury updates from our past couple of days. Next, going over to some recalls and reassignments. Only a few recalls to be talking about in today's video, and that was with the LA Kings and the Philadelphia Flyers, as the Kings recalled Angus Booth, Jared Wright, and Eric Portillo yesterday. yesterday. The Kings had some injury problems. We talked about Kuzmenko, we talked about Fiala. Armia just got injured, so they needed some more offensive weapons, so they called up Booth and Wright, who both actually made their NHL debuts yesterday, and Booth actually got his first career NHL goal. So we'd love to see those things. And then Kemper's dealing with an illness right now, so because of that, they call up Portillo to back up Anton Forsberg, so not too surprising there. And then the Flyers had the knee injury, so they want to add some insurance, so they recalled Adam Ginning from the AHL. I know he's a defenseman, but they just want another extra healthy body up at the NHL level. No interest note there, but those are all the recalls from over the past couple of days. Next, going over to the waiver updates. Now, we saw 5 players be placed on waivers that we talked about in yesterday's video. I mentioned that I thought Breezeball probably clear because he was coming off a season opening injury reserve, and I don't think many teams would want him having not played all this season, so I thought he would clear. I thought Fabbri would clear, given the fact it took him a couple of months to get a contract with St. Louis and all those other teams had a chance to sign him, so I thought Fabbri would clear. I thought Mangiapane would clear because of his cap hit, like he's making $3.6 million. No one even wants to trade for him, so I highly doubted that he was going to get claimed off waivers, and I said the most likely potential options for waiver claims would have been Regula or Kunin, who I thought both are cheaper options, solid depth players, and could help a couple other teams. I was definitely wrong. Regula and Kunin actually cleared, as did Mangiapane and Breezeball, so those 4 all did clear. But it was Robby Fabbri who was actually claimed off of waivers. As the Wild, that we talked about, recently lost Marcus Foligno to injuries for at least the next couple of games, have claimed Robby Fabbri off of waivers. So they claim him from Central Division rival St. Louis. I'm a little bit surprised by that. I thought that maybe Kunin or Regula would have been the guy that teams would have targeted, but Fabbri's the guy who ends up getting claimed off of waivers out of that bunch. So very interesting note there, and we shall see how Fabbri does in the bottom 6 for the Minnesota Wild. And then we saw 3 more guys be placed on waivers yesterday at the recording of this video. I don't know the complete outcome, but Gustav Olofsson, Eric Gustafsson, and Tyler Pitlick were all placed on waivers by the Kraken, Red Wings, and Wild respectively. Now, Gustav Olofsson, like we just talked about earlier in the video, re-signed with the Seattle Kraken, so in order for him to go back to the AHL, he needs to clear waivers. I would expect him to probably do so. Pitlick has been a guy who's been called up and sent down multiple occasions by the Minnesota Wild. With Fabbri now being at the NHL level, they don't need Pitlick, so they placed him on waivers. And he's been a decent depth forward, so I could see a team or two wind up claiming him, but I think more than likely he will wind up clearing. Eric Gustafsson's a very interesting name. He's in the final year of his deal. He's got a $2 million AAV. I think that might scare off a couple of teams, but he's also a guy who can, on most teams, be a really solid third pair offensive defenseman. So I don't think it's a guarantee he winds up clearing, because I could see there be a team or two out there who are in desperate need of some more offense from their blue line, who could use another like 6-7 defenseman who could try and place a waiver claim on Eric Gustafsson. But with that $2 million cap, even though he's in the final year of his deal, I would still lean more towards him probably clearing waivers than being claimed. So very interesting note there. But 4 players cleared waivers yesterday, including 1 guy being claimed off waivers in Fabbri by the Minnesota Wild, and 3 players are currently on waivers who I think will most likely all wind up clearing. So very interesting note there. But those are the waiver updates from the past couple of days. And lastly, here going over to a couple of trade rumors. So we have 4 trade rumors here to talk about. We're going to start off with the Colorado Avalanche. I saw an article recently, or I think it was a tweet or something like that, saying that the Avalanche have been looking for some bottom 6 help, and they could look to try and target a recent guy who got traded a couple of months ago, and that is Kiefer Sherwood. Now, and I think in our last video, or the video prior to that, I did mention that there was a possibility that the Sharks, if they weren't able to get an extension done by Friday, could look to try and flip Kiefer Sherwood because they are on the outside looking into the playoffs. There's no guarantees this team makes the playoffs, and if they get Sherwood and they lose him for nothing and they don't even have a playoff run or anything like that, then it makes no sense to keep Kiefer Sherwood. So there's a possibility that they could come to terms with an extension, and this sort of is a moot point. But at this point in time, it does seem that the Avalanche will have at least some interest in Kiefer Sherwood, and I could definitely see why. He's on the cheaper side of things. He's only making $1.5 million. The Avalanche recently freed up some cap space with a Girard trade, so you have a little more cap flexibility to work with. Adding Sherwood to their bottom 6, I think, would be really, really good. You could put him, once O'Connor gets back to being healthy, with guys like O'Connor and Drury and Kelly, and I think that could really round out their bottom 6 pretty dang well. Now, I'm not sure if the Sharks will be able to acquire the return that they gave up in exchange for Sherwood when they gave up 2 seconds to Vancouver. I think at best they're probably looking at like a 2nd round pick and another lower end asset. That's like a 3rd or 4th round pick, maybe like a decent prospect. So I'm not going to say it's a guarantee the Sharks move him, because there has also been some rumors that Sherwood wants to stay in San Jose, so maybe there's a contract that they can agree upon. But it seems like if Sherwood is available and the Sharks are open to dealing him, keep your eye on the Colorado Avalanche, as they could be looking at Sherwood to sort of round their bottom 6. So let's wait and see on that. Next, going over to Greg Wysinski, he put out a tweet recently talking about the Utah Mammoth, and said that when he was talking to, I think it was a league executive or something like that, or maybe like another insider, he mentioned that person told Wysinski to keep an eye on the Utah Mammoth, as they have a lot of irons in the fire right now. They have a lot of things cooking right now, and there's a very likely chance they could make a couple of big moves before Friday's trade deadline. Now, we just recently talked in our last video about the fact that Elliot Friedman linked them to Robert Thomas. They have in the past been linked to a guy like Jordan Kyrou, and they have in the past been linked to a couple of other top-end players too. Dougie Hamilton's another one who was recently linked to them, so I'm not sure what sort of player they're going to target. They could probably use another top 9 forward, maybe a top 4 defenseman, someone who can really work with that team long-term. So they're probably not looking for someone who's maybe like a rental, probably for someone who's going to be able to help them both now and in the future. I could see him try and target a top 2 center, especially with Schmalz being a pending UFA and very likely going to hit free agency in the offseason. Maybe they try and go after a winger too. So there's a lot of different options the Mammoths could go after. They're in a playoff spot right now. They're in the first wildcard spot, and there's a very likely chance with the weak Western Conference that if they are able to keep their heads above water, they're going to make the playoffs this year. So I could definitely see Utah be a big player. They have some pretty decent draft picks. They have a pretty good prospect pool that they could try and entice some teams to try and wind up making a trade with them. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. So no guarantees by any means that the Mammoths do anything of significance, but Wysinski does say that someone did tell him that the Mammoths are a team to watch out for. They have a lot of irons in the fire, so we'll have to wait and see on that. Next, going over to the Buffalo Sabres and the Philadelphia Flyers. According to Elliot Friedman, I think on his recent 32 Thoughts podcast, he mentions that there's a possibility that if the Buffalo Sabres are looking for a beefier defender on the blue line to try and improve their defensive core, he wonders if they try and target a reunion with Sabres-Ristolainen from Philadelphia. And after he talked about that on the 32 Thoughts podcast in Philly's game yesterday, there was apparently 4 separate scouts for the Buffalo Sabres at that game. So it seems that this connection might be actually real. Now, Sabres, I think, could maybe target more of a forward than a defenseman. I don't think the defenseman is as pressing of a need as maybe adding another forward, but Ristolainen will make some sense. Ristolainen started out his career in the Buffalo Sabres organization, and I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago. He wound up being dealt to the Philadelphia Flyers in a trade that wound up landing them Robert Haig at the time, and the draft pick that led to them selecting Isaac Rosen. So it definitely worked out for both sides, but imagine the Philadelphia Flyers dealing back to Buffalo. Ristolainen has never made the playoffs, so imagine him going back to Buffalo and making the playoffs with the Buffalo Sabres. That would be fantastic. Now, the ask for Ristolainen is pretty high. I think it's like a first-round pick or a second-round pick and good prospect, but the Sabres have assets to deal, so I'm not going to say it's a guarantee by any means, because I do think the more pressing matter for Buffalo will be on the forward group, but I definitely think if they were to go and target some defensive help, love to see Ristolainen go back to Buffalo. Like, you add Power, you have Dahlin, you have Byram, you have Samuelson, you have Metza, you have Kesselring. You add Ristolainen to that defensive core, that puts them over the top. That'd probably be one of the best defensive cores in the entire NHL. So very interesting note there, but I'd keep your eye on the Buffalo Sabres when it comes to Rasmus Ristolainen over the next couple of days, as it could be potentially a very interesting landing spot for Rasmus Ristolainen. So I'll have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to Jimmy Murphy, he was recently talking about some things in an article, and he mentions that the Boston Bruins are currently tracking situations with 2 separate Vancouver Canucks players. That's Connor Garland and Brock Besser. Now, the Boston Bruins haven't linked to both these forwards of Vancouver in the past. Back when Connor Garland's name was up, I think it was about 2, 3, 4 years ago when he was being dealt from Arizona, Boston came up as a potential guy to potentially land him, and even after he arrived in Vancouver, before he signed that extension, there was some talk that maybe the Canucks could move him to Boston. He's, I think, from Boston or has some connections to Boston, and he plays that sort of Boston style game and be a really solid middle 6 addition for Boston. When it comes to Brock Besser, when Besser was heading towards free agency last offseason, Boston was mentioned as a team that had heavy interest in Besser before he wound up re-signing with the Vancouver Canucks. So it seems like Boston is in on a couple of top-end wingers, like we talked about Tippett in our last video, and now since they do have some major interest in tracking the situations with Besser and Garland, according to Jimmy Murphy. So we'll have to wait and see on what happens in this situation. I definitely think that if one of those Canucks players were to get moved, Boston will make some sense because they have been linked to both those guys. Although I do think Garland is probably a little bit more likely because he's more of a Boston style player than Besser is. But we'll have to wait and see. So definitely does seem like the Boston Bruins have some interest in both Canucks forwards, and we'll also wait and see if that winds up coming to fruition in the next couple of days. So definitely, let me know your thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. Do you think Boston could acquire Garland or Besser? Could Philadelphia deal Ristolainen to Buffalo to reunite him with the Buffalo Sabres? How many moves did the Mammoth make, and how big of proportion are they? And do you think that the San Jose Sharks could flip Kiefer Sherwood to the Colorado Avalanche? Definitely your thoughts on all that. We'll solve the other things we talked about in today's video. That is all I want to talk for today. Remember to like this video, and if you liked it, remember to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to with all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for videos coming out in the very near future. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so check that out. I've linked it in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.